When building a company, you need to surround yourself with people you trust. Doesn't matter if you're the best in the world at your job or wholly adequate, if the big cheese trusts you, then your place is as good as guaranteed. It's massively important for any boss, from knowing things that will tick on when you're indisposed, to making sure that new recruits know how to do things the correct way. A company without loyal soldiers will collapse quicker than a poorly built desk. Every wrestling company you can ever think of has its company guys. From Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes in early WCW, Tommy Dreamer and Bubba Ray Dudley in ECW, these wrestlers go above and beyond their duty in the ring to make sure business goes smoothly behind closed doors. WWE's company guys are a whole different breed though. As the most prominent wrestling company in history, WWE has carved out its own path and transformed from a New York wrestling territory into global entertainment phenomenon, and as such their most trusted employees have to walk the line between television sweetheart and ruthless cutthroat bastard. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and these are the 10 biggest WWE company guys. Join us. And a quick note before we get going, this list is focused on wrestlers themselves and not backstage personnel. If that was the case, we would need to mention Dorothy, who's worked in HR for 40 years, or bootlickers like Bruce Pritchard, who will defend the company to the death even when they know they are 100% in the wrong. Not to mention the immeasurable contributions of the late great Pat Patterson. On with the list. Number 10, Seth Rollins. Social media whiz-kid Seth Rollins is undoubtedly one of the best pure athletes WWE has ever employed, and one of the standout performers of his generation. He is also a very prominent company guy. In terms of his role in the company, Rollins is seen first and foremost as Triple H's boy, and as Trips looks to gain more power in the WWE office, you can bet that Rollins' main event run will be further strengthened. Unlike some others on this list, Seth's position at the top of the card cannot be called into question. But it's on the aforementioned social media and in other media appearances that Rollins' allegiance to WWE comes into a life of its own. From trashing former colleagues who left town to defending WWE when they're clearly in the wrong, Rollins always sticks his nose in and gives his 2 cents. His tearing into old buddy Jon Moxley's opinions of WWE and move to AEW, and pompous attitude to the earnings of Will Ospreay are the obvious standout moments which soured a fair few wrestling fans against him. You could totally imagine Vince McMahon unveiling a policy where he gets to eat the pets of his independent contractors, and Rollins would be there front and center defending this decision to the death. Number 9, Randy Orton. Randy Orton is one of WWE's most dependable talents and has been on our screens for nearly 20 years. Sounds absolutely disgusting when said out loud, doesn't it? The third-generation superstar is a WWE lifer, and if WWE closed down tomorrow, you couldn't imagine Randy continuing his career elsewhere. Such is his loyalty to the Fed. Orton did flirt with AEW last year, but it was clearly only to leverage himself a better renewed deal with WWE. So why such commitment? To put it simply, WWE have let Orton get away with absolute murder throughout his career. From allegedly pooping in other wrestlers' bags, accusations of bullying and hazing, to unprofessional conduct in ring, and violations of the wellness policy, WWE have stuck with Randy through thick and thin, rewarding him with countless title reigns and enough money to make Ted DiBiase blush. That sort of trust would elicit loyalty from just about anyone. Orton's defense of WWE in his social media is savvy too, memorably criticizing the indies and the flippy dive style that dominated the scene for years, while proudly extolling the WWE way. Unlike Seth Rollins though, Orton doesn't come across like such a whinger when he does it. Number 8, The Miz. The Miz's rise from WWE superfan to reality TV loser to WrestleMania headlining WWE champion is a heartwarming and inspiring story. No matter your opinions of his work, you have to applaud the fact that Miz took a hell of a lot of crap before making it, including hazing and ridicule from some of WWE's locker room bully boys. As a result of his trials and tribulations and his out-and-out love for the company, WWE have invested a lot into Michael Mizanin. On screen, there have been numerous title runs and high-profile storylines that have seen him become one of the most prevalent and decorated characters on WWE television. But it's away from WWE programming where the company's faith in Miz is best displayed. From the starring roles in WWE movies such as the Marine series, through the Miz and Mrs. reality show, and countless media appearances, Miz has been morphed from dorky TV idiot into slick media machine, and you can bet your bottom dollar he'll be with WWE for life. I mean, could you picture Miz wrestling anywhere else? Miz in the G1? Miz in the Tournament of Death? I think not. Number 7, Shawn Michaels. HBK's loyalty to WWE isn't the same kind of blind devotion as shown by other performers on this list, more a marriage of convenience. Now, we all know about Shawn's conduct in the 90s. He was a right twat. But like Randy Orton, WWE stood by him time and time again and indulged his every whim and tantrum. It didn't matter if he was politicking against fellow professionals, faking injuries to avoid doing jobs, or insulting entire nations, Vince saw money when he saw Shawn, and HBK's job was safer than Fort Knox. There were always rumors that he would jump ship to WCW to join best buds Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Sean Waltman, but they never materialized. Alas, when Michaels severely injured his back and retired, WWE still kept him around and paid him a wage. For all we talk about WWE's callousness towards performers and the criminal loophole that is the independent contractor status, when they get behind someone, they really get behind them. This kind of treatment breeds loyalty. After a second run as an in-ring performer, Michaels is still employed by WWE today, appearing on pay-per-view pre-show panels and helping run NXT with best buds Triple H and Road Dogg. Number 6, Hulk Hogan. Like Shawn Michaels, Hulk Hogan's loyalty to WWE was often a marriage of convenience, and 9 times out of 10, Hogan's loyalty was merely to enhance the reputation of Hulk Hogan and Hulk Hogan alone. One of the few men to have actually transcended the business, Hogan and WWE made each other in the mid-80s, an example of perfect booking and a larger-than-life character that tapped into the cultural zeitgeist. As WWE's biggest star, Hogan did his fair share to keep order. He was never a locker room enforcer out and out, but if he believed that something was best for business, aka the WWE, aka himself, then Hogan would have no problems sharing his concerns with the boss and keeping everything in order. It was Hogan who notoriously ratted out Jesse Ventura when the Body attempted to unionize the boys before WrestleMania 2, and let's not forget his cringeworthy appearance on the Arsenio Hall show where Hogan flat out lied about ever taking steroids in an attempt to clear both his name and that of WWE. Sort of. Eventually, Hogan left for WCW, had spells in TNA, and was temporarily shunned from WWE for his racism scandal, but when they can make money together, WWE and Hogan will always be each other's biggest fans. Brother. Number 5, Bob Holly. Bob Holly was in WWE for 15 years, which is amazing for anyone, but especially someone like Bob who, let's face it, was nobody's favorite wrestler. From geeky race car dork Thurman Plug, through bombastic new Midnight Express member, to cornerstone of the Job Squad, Bob never set the world on fire until WWE found its attitude. When he evolved into Hardcore Holly, it sparked something in him for a couple of years before he became just another name in the company once more. But Bob was one of WWE's locker room enforcers, and his commitment to upholding WWE law was likely a key reason why he was part of the roster until he was 45 years old. However, Holly often took it too far. A notoriously stiff worker, Holly loved to beat discipline into the younger guys who were coming up. He roughed up Matt Cappotelli on Tough Enough, taught Daniel Puder a lesson in the Royal Rumble, and legit battered Rene Dupree mid-match over an unpaid ticket on Holly's rental car. But as for the many people that call Bob a dickhead, there are just as many that say he was a necessary presence in the locker room, his brutish nature born out of a love for the business. Number 4, JBL. Like Bob Holly, JBL was no one's favourite wrestler for the majority of his career. Okay, the APA were cool, but if you say that you weren't surprised when Bradshaw of all people became WWE champion, then you are a massive, ugly liar. Again, like Holly, the no-nonsense, hard-drinking Texan Bradshaw was seen as one of WWE's locker room enforcers, more than willing to dish out a beating or two if it was deemed best for business. Unlike Bob though, Bradshaw's enforcement of the WWE was way less authoritarian, and more like college-style hazing. There are countless horror stories about JBL's behaviour, from questionable shower antics with numerous superstars to out-and-out bullying the likes of The Miz and Joey Styles. Basically anyone smaller than him. JBL once even tried fighting Steve Blackman and nearly got his head kicked off. The silly little sod. But through all the drunken mayhem he caused backstage, or, you know, the time he goose-stepped during a match in Germany, WWE have always stood by JBL, cementing him as a Grand Slam champion and Hall of Famer. JBL has repaid his faith back numerous times, whether through his charity work as an ambassador of WWE, his numerous media appearances, or simply by always being on call when needed. Number 3, John Cena. Squeaky clean, perennial good guy, and face of an era, John Cena is, nonetheless, one of wrestling's most divisive figures. From his rise as Super Cena and his PG-friendly attitude, WWE rebuilt the company around Big Match John as the ruthless aggression era petered out and a more family-friendly image was needed. Knowing that he was once close to being released, Cena went above and beyond in his duties, and as the trusted face of WWE, set a standard for all others to follow. He became the all-time wish granter for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, was always humble and charming in media appearances, and was a dependable name to trot out whenever WWE needed some good publicity. However, Cena, like other top guys before him, let some of his influence go to his head, and if he didn't want to do something, then he would make sure he didn't do it, such as putting over the Nexus at SummerSlam 2010. Cena also took multiple swipes at The Rock for leaving WWE to conquer Hollywood, insisting that he was WWE for life and damn proud of it, before too getting involved with the movie business, the handsome, talented, rich hypocrite that he is. Number 2, The Undertaker. The locker room leader, the judge of Wrestler's Court, the longest serving member of the WWE roster. Is it any surprise that The Undertaker is a WWE guy through and through? Unlike the likes of JBL and so on, Undertaker is apparently fairly measured in his locker room leadership. Trips to Wrestler's Court are infamous, but sentencing usually consisted of buying a few cases of beer for the boys rather than anything particularly mean-spirited or nefarious. While never pushed as the guy like an Austin or Cena, The Undertaker always stuck with WWE. From the lows of the terrible mid-90s to the halcyonic Attitude Era, Taker was that one constant on TV for almost 30 years. But why? Because of Vince McMahon. When questioned about a potential jump to WCW during the Monday Night Wars, Taker once told Sam Roberts, "My loyalty to him for giving me that opportunity was more than the short-term cash I could have gotten by going back down to WCW." In his prime, Taker was always treated with the utmost respect by the company and the boys themselves. When Shawn Michaels threatened to not drop the belt to Steve Austin at WrestleMania 14, Taker was there to subtly remind HBK of how business was done, or else face a monster of a beating. Shawn, of course, went out and did what was necessary. Number 1, Triple H. I mean, how can anyone be more of a WWE company guy than Triple H? From his days as the anachronistic Connecticut Blue Blood through the lows of the curtain call and rise to the main event scene, Triple H has done everything in his power from day one to have a seat at the big table of WWE. Granted, he hasn't always done things the right way though. The notorious Golden Shovel and the brown-nosing and backstage politics of the Clique have earned Hunter as many enemies as he has fans, and even his biggest supporters would probably admit that the Reign of Terror was a bit of a misstep. But away from the ring, Triple H is the ultimate company guy. His work developing NXT from crap game show into one of the most celebrated wrestling products of the past decade is commendable, and the stars that came from the yellow brand paint a picture of a man desperate to prepare for a bright future and help a company succeed. As Vince McMahon gets older, many are waiting with bated breath to see how and when WWE will change when it eventually ends up in the hands of Triple H and wife Stephanie McMahon. If his recent track record is anything to go by, it'll be just fine. Or he'll be a 23-time WWE champion into his 70s. Either way,